Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Rodriguez. I am the Lecture Director at the Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute. I want to thank you all for joining us for our November Conservative Women's Network Luncheon. A special thanks also to Sarah Mills, who's sitting in the front row. She's representing our partner, the Heritage Foundation, who co-hosts this event with us every month. Today we're going to discuss last Tuesday's election results and what they mean for the future of conservatism. We have two of the conservative movement's brightest rising women stars with us today, and they're here with us to give their analysis on last week, as well as tell us what they think conservatives need to focus on going forward. First up will be author, columnist, and news commentator S.E. Cupp. S.E. is a columnist for the New York Daily News, a contributor to The Blaze, and co-host of MSNBC's The Cycle. She is also the author of Losing Our Religion, the liberal media's attack on Christianity, and the co-author of Why You're Wrong About the Right. Her works have been published in The Washington Post, Human Events, and FoxNews.com. She was also the recipient of the 2011 Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute's Conservative Leadership Award, and she is also one of our most requested Luce campus speakers. She earned her bachelor's degree from Cornell and has a master's from NYU. She is also featured as our November woman in our 2012 Conservative Women Calendar, fitting for her to be here today in November. These are available via our website. Our 2013 calendar is also available there. Next up will be Katie Pavlich. She's the news editor for townhall.com and a contributing editor to Town Hall magazine. Katie is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Fast and Furious, Barack Obama's bloodiest scandal and its shameless cover-up. As a journalist in D.C., she has covered everything from White House scandals to the 2012 presidential election. She has been featured in multiple media venues, including Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox Business. She is a graduate of the University of Arizona and a current National Review Washington Fellow. Both of these ladies are available as campus speakers with the Luce Institute if there are any college students here who are interested in them. Please join me in welcoming S.E. and Katie.
I don't recall whose idea it was to have me eat a hot dog in that photo in the calendar, but it was mine. It was mine. It was 100% mine. You know, it's hard to process what happened over the past 4 years just over a week out, especially if you'd been in the trenches, either as an activist or in the media, or someone who just really, really cared and was watching the campaign and the lead up to the election very closely. It's really hard to take a step back and say, what just happened? And I think that conservatives especially thought going into Obama's first term, well, his policies are going to fail, and then his failures will be self-evident, and so people won't vote for him. And that's how rational people think. And, you know, that's a really nice sort of idealistic, optimistic idea that voters go to the polls based on performance. And they don't always, and that's okay. I think it's a bad idea to indict the voters. And you're seeing some folks on the right do that to their peril. It's just not a good idea. To say, you didn't vote for me, it's your fault you didn't think I was awesome. That's not the way forward. But voters vote based on a lot of different things. And as much as this election is going to be rewritten very quickly as having been a mandate for Barack Obama and liberalism, it just wasn't the case. Barack Obama's liberalism, even his most signature liberal policies, are still not popular. We have good exit polling out of the election the day of that suggests 49% to 44% of people would like to still repeal parts or all of Obamacare. That's on Election Day. Now, a lot of those people who would like to repeal parts or all of Obamacare, probably voted for him. We have exit polling saying that a wide majority of people want the government to do less, not more. Well, how do you vote for Barack Obama then? How do you explain that? Entitlement reform, tax reform, securing the borders over an amnesty policy. These are widely popular within the majority. So what was the mandate for then, if not for Barack Obama's big liberal, big government policies? I think it was for the man. The mandate was for the guy. He was, for many reasons, still likable. And I think that Democrats and the president had very successfully convinced the electorate that he needed 4 more years to show that his policies could work. Now, was it right? Was it accurate? Was it truthful? Was it intellectually honest to say that Bush was responsible and so he needs more time? No. But it was effective. And I think that the people who voted for Obama didn't vote for him because they like free stuff. I think they voted for him because they believe that his policies can work if given enough time. Now, I think they're wrong, and I think they'll be proven wrong. But that was what the mandate was for. It was for the guy. So now what? A lot has been made of the coming civil war in the GOP. Apparently, we're going to start fighting about everything. We're going to be fighting with libertarians. We're going to be fighting with pro-life groups. We're going to be fighting amongst ourselves over the way forward. And I think self-reflection is always good in these kinds of times. And I think instead of the civil war that we're told is coming, what we should look forward to and embrace is an opportunity to debate big ideas. Because we didn't spend 4 years debating big ideas. We spent 4 years playing defense to Barack Obama. We sat back and we said, okay, we're just going to respond to all the crazy stuff that he does. So he does Obamacare, we respond. We get angry and we respond. All of the steps along the way, everything he did, we responded. Now, you have to do that. That's good. But where were our solutions? Where were our alternatives? That's not to say that we didn't offer them. Heritage does a great job of putting up solutions and alternatives online. I wish Heritage got a bigger, mass media audience. And there are groups of us in the media who worked really hard to put up alternatives. But I think for the most part, we were happy to watch Obama fail and point out when he did. I think what we need to do over the next 4 years, and we can't wait for the election to be 6 months away to do it, is lay the groundwork for why conservative policies work. It's not good enough to just say that they do. We did that all last year. You have to show people. Show me why welfare reform, expanding welfare policies, show me why that doesn't reduce poverty. We have great data now over the past 4 years to show why that doesn't work. We need to show that. Show me why legal pathways to citizenship and legal immigration are more empowering for Hispanic Americans and other immigrants than blanket amnesty. Show us why that works. Why does keeping more of your own money make you more empowered as a woman or as a young person? Show us why. We didn't really connect those dots. I think when conservatives talk, we talk in platitudes that make total sense to us, and they sound great. But they do need some unpacking. And we don't have the sexy Democratic media machine behind us to bring in Hollywood and sort of obfuscate and distract. We do have to lay out our principles. That's going to be hard over the next 4 years because we're not in power. We can't put policies into place and then say, nationally anyway, and then say, look how this worked. So we're going to have to find microcosmic examples of conservatism working at the state level, at the local level, in the private sector, and make a big effing deal about those microcosmic conservative policies working. Make them famous. Make the mayor who balanced a budget based on fiscal responsibility in some small town. Make him famous. It's going to be a heavy lift and a long haul, but it doesn't require a civil war to do it. We don't need to cannibalize ourselves. We just have to do a better job of laying out the case for why conservative policies are better for everyone. And that might require taking a page from the Democratic Handbook and speaking specifically to various interest groups. That doesn't mean pandering, and that doesn't mean giving away free stuff. That means explaining why to student groups certain conservative policies are going to work for their lives. Speaking to immigrant groups, minority groups, and telling them why conservative policies are going to make their lives easier. We need messages that are empowering. This doesn't have to be about economic entitlement. It can be about economic opportunity. That's what we do really, really well. We just have to explain it better. I'm going to leave you with an anecdote. In 1880, James Garfield was elected kind of by accident to become president of the United States in a time of terrible turmoil. Lincoln had been assassinated just over a decade before. The country was still really divided, and there was a huge fight within the Republican Party between the stalwarts and the half-breeds. The stalwarts wanted to keep the system going, the spoils system. They wanted to promote people within the party based on patronage. So you pay me and I'll give you your seat. And the half-breeds in the Republican Party thought, this isn't working, this isn't right, it's corrupt, we're not getting anything done. We need to get rid of that crony capitalism system and move forward. James Garfield represented the half-breeds, and he was nominated at the Republican National Convention in Chicago by accident. He went there to speak on behalf of his half-breed Republican nominee, and he gave such a great speech that after 20-something rounds of voting, Republicans nominated him president. He didn't want the job. He was a small, simple man from rural Ohio who grew up in abject poverty and just wanted to spend time with his family and read his books. So he reluctantly packed up and moved to Washington. And he got a lot done. He was seen as a uniter. He had been a Union general. He held Kentucky as a Union state against the Confederacy. He fought for the rights of freedmen and thought that slaves didn't just get emancipated. They needed the right to vote and all the rights that we enjoy. He's someone Republicans should be proud of, in short. 200 days into his first term, he was shot by a lunatic, a raving madman. And the madman, people tried to make political sense of it. There was none. He was just a lunatic, like one of these guys we see in Arizona or in Colorado, a lunatic. But the party was so fractured that people made it about the Civil War in the party. Stalwarts believed that he was somehow a half-breed representative and vice versa. And half-breeds called for the highest-ranking stalwarts to be lynched publicly. It was up to his successors to bring the party back together. And it wasn't easy. His own vice president, Chester Arthur, had been a stalwart against him and had been undermining his entire first term. So he had to come in and unify the party, and he did. And he took up all of the objectives that Garfield had been working for. That was a civil war within the party. This is not. This is just a test of our fortitude and sort of an opportunity for us to get back in touch with what we do best and who we are. We should remember those moments of really, really terrible disunity in the party and think, we're better than that. We're beyond that. We can't fall prey to that kind of cannibalizing again. So as tough as this has been and as sad and disappointed as we were, I am not seceding. I am not hanging my American flag upside down. And that's a slap in the face to all of us who fought for 4 years to get these ideas out there and who are not abandoning ship. And I'm actually fairly optimistic. I think this is a great opportunity for us to become a stronger and better party. And I think we will be when we're done. Thank you.
I think we'll be stronger as well. We have to be, or it's going to be worse than it was when we thought we lost. So, as he just elegantly stated, we lost for a lot of reasons. And we can talk all day long about what those reasons are. We can talk about what went wrong politically inside the Romney campaign. We've been seeing a lot of stories about things that went horribly wrong inside that campaign that they were very good at not showing publicly. But one big takeaway for me after the election, and I agree with that, C, in the sense that it's really difficult to analyze the election a week out. But the one big takeaway for me was that people just didn't think Mitt Romney cared about them. They just didn't think that he cared. And I think moving forward, it's really important for Republicans to understand they have to have a human contact with the electorate to win elections. And what I mean by this is we've heard also that conservatives need to change their principles. We're out of touch, we're too far to the right, and this is something we hear after every election that we lose, and it's just not true. We don't need to change our principles and policy positions. We just need to change how we present them and market them and package them. And we have a public relations problem. We don't have a policy problem. Our policies work. They make sense. Anyone with common sense knows that they do. And one of the main areas that this PR problem is prevalent is in the who cares about me category. And since the election, I've heard multiple people on the ground and many pundits say that the Obama campaign and the Democrats are really the party that cares about people. And the left cares about me, therefore I'm going to vote for them despite the policies maybe failing over the past 4 years. And this is actually a very false narrative. It has been proven over and over again that Republicans and conservatives are far more charitable and caring than the left. Take, for example, in terms of dollar amounts. Barack Obama and Joe Biden, prior to being elected president in 2008, when everyone started watching him, President Obama donated 3% of his income to charity each year. And I'm going to use the term charity today in a very broad sense, so just keep that in mind. But from 2000 to 2004, Obama's average giving was 0.9% for those 4 years. Vice President Joe Biden has given a consistent and pathetic average of 1% of his income to charity over the past 10 years. And to put this in perspective, that means that Biden gave just $3,690 to charity in the past 10 years, according to a study done in Politico, which is an average of $369 per year, which is probably more than he spends, or less than he spends on dinner on a Friday night in Washington, D.C. And you compare that to Mitt Romney, who was painted this election, and this is how Republicans in general are painted, as a greedy, out-of-touch, white, rich man. But throughout his lifetime, he's donated more than $30 million to charity. And throughout the past 20 years, the Romneys have given an average of 13% of their income away each year. And I might add that the reason why he is capable of doing this is because he was rich and had a lot of money. You know, the concept of if you have more money, you have more money to give away kind of thing. But in 2011 alone, the Romneys gave away $4 million. And the left tried to discredit his charitable giving by saying, well, it all went to the Mormon church, so it doesn't really count as charity or helping people, right? Okay, so let's take a look at what the Mormon church has used that money for. Not only to feed and clothe people in need, but in America, but all over the world. And before Hurricane Sandy hit a couple weeks ago, what did the Romney campaign do? They donated their campaign bus to collect donations for hurricane relief items before the storm hit, so that way that people who were in the path of the storm would have supplies prior to the destruction. Whereas you compare that to FEMA, who ran out of water due to lack of preparation. And so they can criticize Republicans for donating money, but you look at where they give it, and you can criticize the Mormon Church and Mitt Romney's charitable giving, but they actually do a good job of actually helping people. And so on top of giving to his church, which was helping people around the world in the United States, his money went to charities related to cystic fibrosis, cancer, multiple sclerosis, but he was painted out of touch on women's issues and particularly health issues. And more generally speaking, conservatives give the most non-monetarily. They're more likely to give blood. They're more likely to donate food to a soup kitchen. than their liberal counterparts. And so, the question is, well, why does charity really matter? Do we really want to get in this fight about who cares more? It seems so so small, well, I care more than you do kind of thing. And the fact is that it actually does care. It matters a lot. Caring about people is the bottom layer of why people vote, because it's emotional. And liberals always win on arguments not based on policy because they play to emotions. And the fact is that the emotional argument when it comes to helping people and caring about people is on the Republican conservative side. And the way that conservatives do things to help people is also more effective. They know that small private charities are the most effective at distributing limited resources to the greatest amount of people. And they do this through their churches, they do this through nonprofits, and they do this from their own pockets. And it works in a similar fashion to the government. The bigger the bureaucracy and the farther up the chain that the decisions are made, the less help people get and the less the resources are distributed in a fashion that more people are helped. And so conservatives have become professionals at the local level where it has the most impact of getting people the help that they need. And of course, as we know, Barack Obama's a perfect example of this. The left promotes big government rather than private organizations to solve problems, which makes their causes in the end less effective. And we know that the conservative way of helping people is based on a simple and sustainable concept, right? Don't give a man a fish, instead teach him how to fish. Whereas we know the left uses the unsustainable method of government handouts. Leading up to the election, we've seen this balloon. I mean, we've seen that, in the past 4 years, a record number of people are on food stamps. And you would say, well, as he argued that people didn't vote for free stuff, I would argue that a good portion of people did vote for free stuff. There was a story yesterday showing that if all food stamp recipients voted for Barack Obama, he would have 75% of the vote that he needed to get elected. And once you get that handout, it's very difficult to get off of it. And it's very difficult to want to go out and pay for things on your own. And, it sounds harsh. I know that some people need help. But the fact is that once you get on, it's very difficult to get off. And that's part of the government machine. And so we've seen this play out with our increasing deficits in the past 4 years, and we've seen it play out at the ballot box. And the fact is that those benefits are going to run dry, whereas private charities and people donating their own money is a sustainable method for people to get help. And so going back to the public relations argument, they have to learn how to package and promote the idea of personal responsibility and growth leading to a better life in a better way, and understanding that they have to go door to door and community organize and tell their stories. I know that we make fun of community organizing all the time, but that's how the left wins, and that's how Barack Obama got elected last week. And it's extremely effective, and it's a way to make that human contact. The reason why the left wins the argument of the right is uncaring is because they're making us dehumanize. They dehumanize the left, and they make the left the people who actually care about you. And so you have to have people going door to door. You have to have people going into communities they might not be comfortable with and talking about why conservative policies are actually better for them, can get them out of the situation that they're in, that they don't necessarily want to be in, but they feel like they have nowhere else to go. And I know that, nonprofits have made some progress with this in the past 4 years. Americans for Prosperity has made some progress on this. FreedomWorks has done a pretty good job of, getting into some different communities and reaching other types of voters. But making that human connection and going beyond the argument of just vote for my candidate is important. I mean, you can tell people all day who to vote for, but you have to present a reason why that candidate cares about them and why their life is going to be better. And so, and then telling stories. I mean, I know that the president got a lot of heat a couple months ago for saying that one of the things he regrets throughout his presidency was not telling enough stories. But the fact is that storytelling is an extremely effective way to let people know what you're doing, and once again, to let them know how they care about you. I mean, how many times have you seen a documentary on NPR or HBO about these leftist organizations helping the homeless? But there's tons of nonprofits and churches on the conservative side who are also helping the homeless, if not more. And so it's really important to talk about that. During the Romney campaign, they made it seem like Mitt Romney was completely out of touch on women's health issues. And they should have had Ann Romney on every television show, on every ad, on every radio station, talking about how Mitt Romney cared for her when she had his children, how he cared for her when she had breast cancer, how he cares for her every day while she lives with MS, and that is something that another person can relate to. But instead, they didn't utilize that. And so, you know, it comes from a place where conservatives don't tend to be very loud, which is why we don't hear a whole lot about conservatives in Hollywood, even though they exist. You know, humility is something that we value, but the problem is that if, you know, it's humility or talking about simply what you're doing. You have to show how you're helping these communities. You have to show people how you're not out of touch, and that you're actually providing services to people that are better than what the government can provide them. Because there's a vacuum. If they're not getting help somewhere, they're going to go somewhere else. And so it's a battle of not only ideas, but also helping people. And so I really just think the bottom line, in terms of, you know, who specifically people vote for this election, for me anyway, was that as long as, you know, the Democratic Party cares more about the sick and the poor and the weak than the Republicans show they care about, because, as I said, with the numbers and everything else, you know, Republicans actually help people more. But as long as people have this false narrative in their mind about the left helping them and they care, they're going to vote for Democrats. And so I think that's something that we really have to look at and change the way that we help people. It's not just about writing a check, but also getting into communities and having the human-to-human contact with people and talking to them about, you know, if you just make that one little effort, your life can be so much better. Your safety net doesn't have to be the government, it can be yourself. And so I think that's something that, for me, stood out for the election. So I think we'll start the discussion part of the segment now.
We do have two interns with microphones, one on each side. If you'll just raise your hand, I'll call on you from here. Please give your name and your affiliation before asking your question, and wait for the mic to get to you, please, so we can all hear you. Any questions? Who'd like to go first?
We'll do this like class, and we'll call on you.
Good.
Hi, my name is Andrea Delvecchio. I'm with the Patriot Republican Women's Club. My question is, or what I'd like to hear from you, is one of the things that's bothering now in the post-election discussions and reflections is the way people are bashing Romney now. I mean, this was the first election that I was very passionate about and very involved, and I really grew to respect the man, admire him, and really believe that he was the guy who could do the great work that we need to turn this country around. And now I'm hearing all these people that were surrounding him starting to bash him and say bad things about him, and I'm really upset about that. Can you comment on that?
He was a great man, is a great man, would have made a great president. I think you could still have full confidence in that. And didn't run a perfect campaign. And I think as conservatives, if we're honestly looking to make changes or to move forward, we have to be honest about some of the things that went wrong. Katie pointed some of them out. It's not a hit on him personally, but from a strategy standpoint, the campaign made some mistakes. Mistakes we wouldn't want repeated. Now, you know, to sound cynical, in the days since the election, you've seen some governors and Republican voices come out and say, we're distancing ourselves from Mitt Romney. Again, it's cynical, but they have to do that. And this was the opportunity. They have to be able to say, okay, we're moving forward. If they drag Mitt Romney along with them for 6 months or a year or 2 or 3 or 4, then it's impossible to have new conversations because you're constantly defending the last thing he said, the last thing he did. And that's not the right way to move forward. Now, I don't know that it's particularly couth to bash him either, but it's politically smart for someone like Bobby Jindal to come out and say, that's not the way we're going to win the next election, by talking like that. Nothing personal to Mitt Romney. It's not how we're going to do it. Chris Christie was on Morning Joe this morning. He said something similar. He said, Mitt Romney's my friend. I voted for Mitt Romney, But the comments that he made in that call to donors, that's not the way forward. They're right, it's not the way forward. And if we stick around defending that kind of stuff, we're not going to move forward. So it was actually the perfect pivot point, and whether Mitt Romney knew it or not, he gave us a gift to say, okay, closing the door on this chapter. And we're moving forward less than 2 weeks away from the election. That's actually amazing that we get to sort of, this is over, let's go ahead. So I know it's hard to hear, and believe me, people will be defending Mitt Romney forever because he's a good man and he deserves to be defended. But politically, it is the right time to say, some of this stuff didn't work. Let's do it differently.
I think, too, you see this with every Republican campaign that loses. So, for example, in 2008, whose fault was it?
Sarah Palin's.
Sarah Palin's fault. When actually, if you look at the course of that campaign, it was not Sarah Palin's fault. And the only reason why John McCain didn't lose by more is because Sarah Palin was on the ticket. And so you fast forward to 2012, and more specific to your question about people who worked inside the Romney campaign coming out and blaming Mitt Romney. I know that the Romney campaign staffers, some of them have come out and said that we failed him. Our data was wrong. We gave him bad information. We didn't have a good youth strategy. I mean, they should have had someone on staff who was going to come up with a college campus initiative, because the reason why Mitt Romney lost some of the swing states is because they didn't spend any time on college campuses. And so, campaigns eat their own. I think, I agree that you have to move forward, but I also don't like the approach of someone like Chris Christie coming out and saying, this is why all these things didn't work, this is why, blah, blah, blah. We don't need to tell the world why we failed. We can just say, shut the door, that campaign's over, we're moving forward, and then have those conversations behind closed doors about why the Republicans are going to do things differently next time. Because I am of the opinion that the left is going to try and bring back Romney anyway in the next election, as they did with George Bush. They're always, comparing the next generation of Republican leaders to the previous. So I think it's helpful to just move forward without a whole lot of talking publicly about why the campaign failed. Next question.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Morris. I'm an attorney in D.C. I fall roughly between 30 and 40 years of age. And I noticed in my own personal life, and then also from reading the exit polls, that in this election, women my age and younger were voting predominantly, if not singularly, on the issue of abortion. And I'm just wondering how in the future, if we need to get away from that issue in order to win elections, what do we do? How do we frame that discussion? How do I get my friends who are very educated to not only vote on that one issue, because there are so many other things at play?
Yeah, I think that this is something that, as you said in her talk, is that we say a lot of things that make sense to us. And to us, the issue of abortion should be talked about, and I think it should be as well. But when we make the argument that people aren't going to fall for the stupid abortion, free birth control argument, they do. And Obama won heavily, like you said, with that age group based on this small potatoes argument of we're going to take away your birth control. And that was something that I think conservatives thought wasn't going to resonate because we thought people were smarter than that, and it didn't work. The fact is, and I think it goes back to marketing and PR again, the fact is that the majority of the country is pro-life. Now, that might not be true with the specific demographic that you're talking about. I don't have a very clear answer on that question. I think that it's important to package the argument surrounding the child, not surrounding the people involved, because it's really about someone's life, and that's what we believe. And so I think focusing on that issue really changes people's perspective in the sense of, okay, so I'm not dealing with a mother's choice, I'm actually dealing with the life of a child. And I think people see that differently and weigh that differently because they are very different arguments to be made. So I think paying attention to that argument is good, but I also think not compromising on that is important as well. So maybe just finding a different way to market it.
Yeah, I think those are great points. I think, you know, the tendency, and I've already heard this, is to say, well, we just need to talk about it less. Talk more about the economy. Well, I think we did a really good job of talking about it less, but the problem is they're always going to bring it up. They want us to talk about it. If you remember, the whole raging debate over contraception didn't start with us. It started when the Obama administration put that clause in the HHS mandate. We responded to it. I firmly believe it was put in there on purpose to get us to talk about contraception. We took the bait, and of course we believed in the argument that we were having, but we didn't introduce these issues to the campaign and the election. So not talking about it isn't going to work. They're going to find ways to get us to talk about it. So I say, let's talk about it a lot. Let's talk about our pro-life values. We don't have to be incendiary and crazy about it, but I don't think there's anything crazy about our values. And as Katie pointed out, they're the values of the majority. So let's make firm, compassionate, impassioned defenses for being pro-life, as well as explaining and expressing some tolerance for people who disagree with us. You can disagree with me, but that you're not going to weaken my argument, and you're certainly not going to shut me up about it. I just don't think it's a winning solution to sort of hide and put social conservatives away for 4 years, lock them up. I'd rather try to, as Katie said, shift the conversation about abortion to the life that we are protecting and not the life that we're infringing upon. That's a good way to do it. And also to talk about how damaging abortion can be psychologically for women. And we just want women to know all of their options, have as much information as they can about that process and about that experience. It needs to be a message of compassion and not vitriol. But it can't be a message of silence.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work.
And to add to that, too, I think that simply asking people the question of, why don't you think about what that means? A simple question like that makes people really think about what an abortion is. I mean, a simple question like that. And also I think giving comparisons, too. I mean, you would say, well, do you think that you should have more requirements to go tanning at a tanning booth than to have an abortion? Because that's the case. That's what Planned Parenthood wants. They want, 16-year-olds to be able to have an abortion without telling their parents. But then the federal government wants you to have to sign a waiver from your parents to tan at the age of 18. And so making, like she said, not vitriolic arguments, but just simple common sense arguments that don't make sense to a lot of people like that really gets people thinking and asking very simple questions like, well, have you thought about what that really means? And I promise you it'll change their mind.
Yes, sir.
Micah Witherspoon with the Heritage Foundation. What kind of talking points or issues do you think conservatives could win with younger people, the younger generation? Obviously, the female vote was pretty hot for Obama, and the young vote as well.
I mean, I hate to say it, but taxes.
Yeah.
I really do. I mean, this is a group of people who are getting ready to, if not already, enter the workforce and, God willing, be on their own. And I think they are prime candidates to scare the crap out of them about taxes. And, welcome to the world. This is what you're in for. Imagine having 30%, 40%, 50% of your income being taken away. Imagine the complicated process of filing your taxes when there's these deductions and those deductions and these loopholes and these rates and these, the argument for comprehensive tax reform, I think, is prime for everyone. But I especially think we can communicate to students on an economic level. We want to make this easier. And we don't want to penalize you out the gate or penalize your success or make it harder for you to be, file as a small business. I mean, we want to make all of your dreams that lay out in front of you possible. I think it's hard because students aren't living in the real world yet. So So they don't really know tangibly what much of that means. But that's why we have to scare them now. We have to scare them about how difficult and terrible it is, how terribly shocking it is to come into the real world. And when you have government against you, and that's what's happening. Government is against you. It's even harder. So they already know about unemployment. They already know how hard it is to get a job. They're going to figure out healthcare on their own. There's no use talking to them about getting sick or dying. They just have no conception of it. So, and we're not going to win on the sexy Hollywood kind of stuff. It's just, I think it's a waste. I'd hit them with taxes.
Yeah, and I think the way that groups like Heritage can do that is, you know, in college you go to or in high school, I guess, when you're a senior in high school even, you go to the counselor's office and they show you all these careers and they have the salaries next to it. Well, that's the salary before you pay taxes. Mm-hmm. So if you take the taxes out and say, this is actually your take-home pay, you know, and this is what you're giving to the government, that really will give people a perspective before they decide to go into a particular field about what they're going to be paying. And it'll really show them that the more they want to achieve, the more their success is docked. But I would argue with the young people, and this is why the Ron Paul movement was so successful, is because Ron Paul found a way to package the one thing that conservatives and libertarians have, and that's freedom. The number one thing that we have is freedom. That's what we promote, and that's freedom from the government, that's freedom from taxes, that's freedom from your parents. It's all about being an individual, and young people want that. They don't want to be taking their parents' money overall. They don't want to be, you know, paying student loans back to the government their entire life. And so really marketing freedom, I think, is an easy way to get young people on board and make them realize that if you're going to take goodies from the government becomes your parents. And if you don't want to be under your parents, well, try working with the government. So I think marketing freedom in a better way is definitely helpful.
We have to make taxes really uncool.
Yeah.
We have to make them hate taxes. Mm-hmm. You know, because I think Obama and Democrats did a really great job of making big government cool and demonizing small government. Small government is evil and heartless. I think we have to make taxes evil. Yeah. And it's a really simple message. It's not hard. Yeah. Most people agree that taking your money away from you that you worked for and earned isn't cool. Don't do that. I think we just have to hammer that more and more and more.
Well, and bouncing off that argument, I mean, Obama has made big government sexy because he thinks that he tries to provide things for young people. So he'll say, well, I'll give you this and I'll give you that. Well, if you talk to young people about if you weren't paying as high of a tax rate, you could have that new car. And you could have that new TV. And you could have that spring break trip to a really nice place, you know, and break it down to just simple things that in America we're allowed to have because we're successful, right? It doesn't have to be this wonky analysis. It can be, oh, that $20,000 you paid in taxes last year, yeah, you could have, you know, put a down payment on a home, but you're still living in your one-bedroom apartment and paying a lot of rent kind of thing. You know what I mean? So,
or with your parents.
Yeah, kind of a what could you have gotten for the money that you paid the government kind of thing.
Peter Parisi, I'm a editor and sometimes columnist at the Washington Times. I did a column the Friday before the election. The premise of it was, if Barack Obama wins, blame Bush. And my point was simply that for 4 years, Obama went around blaming Bush for all his ills, and in fact, said that he couldn't, the reason he hadn't solved all these problems continued to be because of Bush. And I blame Bush because he didn't stand up for himself. For 4 years, he didn't shoot these arguments down when he could have. And a Gallup exit poll continued to show that 40% of the electorate still, in fact, blames Bush. So I guess I just would like your reaction. Was, in fact, Bush to blame for Obama being reelected?
You know, I wrote a similar column. I said, if Mitt Romney wins, blame John McCain. And my argument there was that Mitt Romney didn't need a new message and he didn't need a makeover. He needed a time machine. He needed to run in 2008. He ran at a singularly inconvenient time to be a billionaire plutocrat, to be, you know, in the midst of a class war and Occupy Wall Street. I mean, that's not when you put a billionaire up for presidential election. He ran after Obamacare when he had to defend his own health care mandate. If he had run in 2008, I mean, he ran, but if he had been the nominee in 2008, wouldn't have to defend anything. He could say, look what I did in Massachusetts. Wasn't it great? It was a terrible time to be Mitt Romney. And I firmly believe had he run in 2008, he would have won. As for Bush, look, Bush made some mistakes. And it was not calling out some of his big spending that led to some of our problems. The Tea Party, we have to remember, arose out of Bush bailing out the banks. So the sort of looking back at Bush with some honesty, I think was ultimately good for us. But would I have wanted to see more of George W. Bush on the campaign trail? Absolutely. Absolutely. I still admire him greatly and think he did a good job. And I think he could have shut down some of the arguments that were made about him. But I think what he did was really noble and said, this is not my fight anymore, and these folks are going to duke it out. I don't want to muddy the waters. I don't want to politically taint anybody or make them have to explain for the things that I'm going to say on the trail. I think it was sort of what had to be done. It was a convenient talking point for Democrats, but I'm not sure there was a way around it.
One thing, yeah, on the Bush argument, I think it's quite funny because I think liberals, they'll never admit this, but they actually liked a lot of Bush's big spending policies. And, you know, Obama was able to blame Bush without getting a lot of criticism from the left, or was allowed to actually be very similar to George Bush in terms of spend. Obviously, Obama was much worse, but in terms of spending, big government programs, Obama was capable of kind of taking Bush's policies and inflating them and blaming it on Bush while the left sat back and supported it. So I could say you could blame Bush because it worked. Like you said, the poll said 40% of people do. And I think I'm harping on marketing today, but it goes back to the idea that the Obama campaign used that as their message, and they were very good at pushing that. So I think that your column was right on in saying that, you know, it's Bush's fault for kind of starting off the big spending, bailing out snowball that continued for the next 4 years. So.
Any other questions? Okay, one up here.
I'm Glenn Wright with Eagle Forum, and forgive me, I'm going to bring the social issues back up.
We're going to talk about it more. That's good.
Well, if we look at, I think we can say that we lost 2 Senate races that were ours because of the social issues. So practically speaking, our platform reflects one thing. We've got the GOP talking heads kind of reflecting another. The campaigns stuck strictly to the economic issues. What do you think needs to happen going forward with the establishment, with the GOP, with us grassroots groups who have, people across the nation? What needs to practically happen to be able to kind of solidify our stance and relate that to the American people?
You mean specifically on social issues or?
Dealing with people like Aiken and Murdoch?
Yeah, and having Karl Rove reject that, the NRSC completely pulling out, and then, all of that.
And then going back
Right.
and giving
Right.
money.
What,
Uh-huh.
what needs to happen?
I think it's hard to,
Yeah, this is a hard question.
No, it is, because the whole point of, the whole part of the Tea Party was to say, we're not going to be accountable to the establishment, okay? The establishment has done it wrong, and we want to go out on our own. This is grassroots. We can speak for ourselves, and we don't need to, toe any party lines. Okay, well, when that happens, and just get these guys out of nowhere, or in some cases, state legislature, who are accountable to no one, then when they say stuff, we really don't have a whole lot of leverage to say, no, you're going to walk that back right now, and you're going to explain, and then you're going to do this and this and this. I mean, there was none of that. And so you had someone like Aiken doubling down and saying, I'm not going anywhere. Well, that's just great. That's really great. We're really appreciative. Thanks. 2 weeks before the RNC. That's really nice. Thanks. Terrible. And you cannot underestimate how much damage he did Not by just saying that, but by sticking around. It would not be an overstatement to say part of the reason we lost was because of that moment. 100%. Democrats ran away with that story. And it made us look really stupid. What we do in the future, we have to get better at who we put up. We've gotten burned by this before. I won't name names, but you all know who I'm talking about in 2010. Not everyone gets to run for office. I know this is a democracy and we want people to come out of schools and the private sector and moms, and this is all great. Yes, but there's still a vetting process. And we still have to make sure these are people that we can put on a national stage and not look embarrassed at the end. You don't get carte blanche, and you don't just get our blessing and our backup just because you say you want to run. We have to get better and more disciplined, I think.
Yeah, and politically, the reason why groups like the RNC and they all pulled out was because they were trying to protect Mitt Romney, which didn't work because Aiken stayed in.
And then they went back.
And then they went back, which ultimately
looks
just looked
terrible.
horrible. Right. I think it goes back to, again, how we talk about abortion. The idea that they would even mention the word rape in their response is ridiculous. They should have just said, it's for the life of the child, end of story, move on, and make it a very short, quick answer. And we knew that question was coming. Who was prepping these people?
It's not the first time we've heard the question.
We've heard this question for years. This is a basic question that gets asked to every conservative candidate when the topic of abortion comes up. Prepping these candidates better beforehand is essential, especially, sorry guys, but you have a little harder when it comes to talking about abortion and rape because, the obvious situation. One thing that drove me crazy was I went on CNN right after the Murdoch comment, and Van Jones and Charles Blow and Piers Morgan were all against me. And, they were making the argument that if you do not believe in abortion after a rape, that you are pro-rape. And, they were making this argument on national television, that if you believe that the life of a child should be protected, even in the case of rape, that you are pro-rape, which is insane. And so, it's difficult. It's a very difficult line to walk, but it's an important line to walk. And there are ways to talk about things that will not get us in that situation and preparing for that question. Everyone knows that question is coming. You're going on to a liberal media outlet, which is the majority of them. They're going to ask you that question. They're going to ask you that question in a debate, especially in a year where the entire Obama campaign, which is what all the lower races are really protecting, are focusing on the war on women, right, and capitalizing off that. So I think talking about it and preparing for questions like that and having a better answer, not changing your principles, not changing where you stand on it or saying we're not going to talk about it. Because I've also heard the argument from the left that men just shouldn't talk about it.
No,
and I do not agree with that at all. But, coming up with a better way to package that answer would be good.
Yeah, and prepping them. You're right.
Yeah,
the question's coming.
Yeah.
Men have every right to weigh in on abortion.
Yeah.
And so-called women's issues. You need advocates wherever you can find them. I don't think anyone told Abraham Lincoln, you can't talk about slavery. It's just absurd. So I think you're right that we just need to talk better about those issues and get better at picking these candidates and prepping them.
Murdoch was a softball, right? That happened after Aiken.
Yeah.
The idea that his campaign didn't prep him for that question going into a debate is insane. So. Yeah, go ahead.
I should clarify too. I was also, there were 8 states with social referenda on the ballot, and in 7 of those 8 states, the social issues did better than the GOP headliners. So I think that, and that was kind of more my question was, how do we all come together as one and be like, we have to talk about all of this? Practically, because we say we want to be one big united party, but that's just not happening.
Well, it's not happening because, what happened in 2010 was sort of a tidal wave, and like an earthquake. And so the reverberations from that, I don't think have finished yet. So it's hard to coalesce as a party when you have folks who want to remain outside the party. And this is not blaming the Tea Party for not wanting to be part of the GOP establishment. I get it completely. But we do have to find ways to talk as teammates and as party mates, or we're just going to keep shooting ourselves in the foot. We saw the candidates that lost in 2010, that I won't mention, and then we saw the candidates that lost this time around. It's going to keep happening. We have to communicate better. No one needs to leave the party. No one needs to have more or less influence. We just have to work together, and we so obviously didn't do that.
Yeah, I think organizing a message and being consistent and kind of merging the economic issues with the social issues, because I always say that people who say that they're fiscally conservative and socially liberal make no sense because they cancel themselves out. If you're socially liberal, your big government policies that pay for your socially liberal behavior cancel out the conservative fiscal side of your argument. And so, putting social issues and economic issues hand in hand on the conservative side and packaging it in a message together for the party is good. And I'm of the belief that I think it's good for there to be people inside the Republican Party holding the establishment accountable. But I also believe that candidates should be vetted and prepared. And so there are ways to have accountability within a party, while also putting up good candidates and addressing all of the issues, not just one or the other. And as Essie brought up, we're not the ones to bring up the social issues. They are. They make it seem like we are the ones who are always in people's bedrooms and always the one waging the culture war, and we're not. They are. And so, I think it's fair for conservatives to defend themselves on that issue, and they absolutely should. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much to Katie and Essie for being here today.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
We have a couple of things for the two of you to thank you for being here today.
Oh.
Of course. You can't leave our events without a gift from CBL. For both of you, and you can stay seated, we have our new Clare Booth Luce Policy Institute tote bag. I have one for each of you. And we also have our limited edition Clare Booth Luce Policy Institute mug. I promise it really is limited. With her quote, "No good deed goes unpunished." I have one for each of you.
Thank you. That'll be perfect.
And for Heritage,
We have
Christmas.
yes, it is.
Christmas early.
You can come up with samples from the 7th.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for coming. We will have
Thank
lunch
you.
in the room next door. Our speakers will be here for a couple moments if you didn't get to ask a question and would like to. And we just want to say thank you and hope we see you for lunch.
Thanks, guys.